And I am just connecting my phone and hearing myself echo, so just give me a second here to share my screen and we'll get started.
Problem.
All right, Min, I've muted my laptop to avoid any echo. Let me know if there's any issues. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead with it.
Yep, your audio seems fine.
Oh, you were very quiet. Okay, all should be good now. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen now. I can see my own screen. And what I'm going to do now is go beyond, well, first off, go over what we did last time around in setting up a personal account and take it a few steps further so that we can set up an enumerator account. And essentially what we're going to do here is put in all of the automation that we had beforehand and then start restricting access so that if we have our data collectors, we will just send them this QR code for them to scan. It'll load all of these settings up that we're about to have. And in so doing, we will have them with a fully functional data collection app that is completely automated and also very restricted, so that we essentially have a very bare bones app for them. They don't get to go into the server. They don't get to go into the username section. They don't get to change any of the automation configurations we put in and all of that. So what we're going to do, for those of you who are maybe going to be responsible for administering this to enumerators, please go ahead from here. If you have an enumerator account, as in separate from your project account, so you have two, maybe you have your administration login where you create your forms and manage the data and all the rest. And then you have an enumerator account that you use strictly for data collection and only share the necessary forms with that account. This is the one we're going to focus on now. So everybody can, of course, please follow along on your phones if you'd like to, if you want to set this up just for the sake of practice, but really keep this in mind for setting up your enumerators. Now, what you're seeing on my screen is probably not the same thing you're looking at anymore, because I can add a brand new project, but I've wiped my app clean essentially. But there's a very quick and easy way, if you're already logged in on ODK, that you can add a new project. And to do that, you would simply click the K at the top right of the screen, and it will bring up a new window that says Add Project on the lower left corner. And so that's essentially what we're going to do. And for me, I'm going to edit. I'm not going to scan, or I'm sorry, I'm going to manually enter rather than scan my QR code because I don't have one yet. And I'll put in my project details here. Now this URL, let's see if I can get it to be full screen without doing that. This URL that we see here on the screen is the same one that we've used previously. So hopefully everybody remembers this. This is what you want to use for login. So I'll maybe hold here for a moment so that everybody just makes sure they have this the same way. You can always copy it from your previous username that you're logged in on. But just to make sure that everybody sees it one more time, I'll keep it on the screen for another 10 seconds or so. All right. So if you don't already have this, Min, I'm sure you can type it in the chat, or you can ask a colleague to remind you, or you can take a photo. But let's continue on. And what I'm very quickly going to do is actually unshare my screen so I can put in my username and password without it being recorded. So just give me a moment. Okay, so we're back. I have my username and password entered. And once you have this ready, you're simply going to go to the bottom right of the screen, which down here, and click Add. Now, in order to make sure that we've logged in correctly, as we've done before, let's click the Get Blank Form button on the front page just to see if it gives us an error or brings us through and shows us the forms that our account has currently. All right, well, I am in the fortunate position that I did not make a typo here, so I have all of the forms appearing to me that are on my account, meaning I was able to log in successfully. If you did not see the same thing when you log into the enumerator account, for example, if you get an error on this page, then you have to go back to the server, make sure your URL and password are correct, and the username, of course. So maybe just quickly to show you how we would do that. If you need to double check or fix an error, you would click this K, the top right, the same K that you would click, as I mentioned before, to add a new project. But instead of saying add project, you would say go to the settings. And from the settings, here we see everything as it is when you first log into an account. If you need to make any edits, you click server at the top, and now you can make these changes here. But all right, so let's get underway. Let's start putting the automation together as we did before. A little bit more quickly than last time, just to make sure that everybody is refreshed on it, but also not to drag this on, because I think most people should be remembering it. If I click form management, the first thing I'm going to choose is the blank form update frequency. I'm sorry, blank form update mode, and I'm going to say exactly match server. Next is where I adjust the automatic download frequency. And it says every 15 minutes presently. Let's maybe change that. Let's change that to every hour. I think every 15 minutes is a bit excessive. So now we have it set to every hour, meaning 24 times a day. Our phone will check the server, check our account, see if there's any new forms or new updates there, and then automatically download them. We're also going to keep hide old versions, old form versions. We're going to keep that checkbox there. And we're going to scroll down to where it says auto send. Right now, it's turned off, but instead, for me at least, I want it to be Wi-Fi or cellular. But again, keep in mind how your data collectors are going to be using this. Maybe you want it to be Wi-Fi only, or maybe you are topping off their credits and you want cellular to be an option as well. Just think about what works for your situation. Now from here, I want to make sure high-res video is not checked. So you see I have high-res video. I don't want that just because I think it will be very hard to transfer. I don't think we're going to be having any videos, but in the event that we are, it's probably best not to have high-resolution videos unless you absolutely need them, but that's something to really thoughtfully consider how valuable that is. Image size, we should be okay unless we start to notice that our images are coming in too large and they're causing data transfer problems. We can leave it. But otherwise, I think our automation is generally good. So I'm going to go back, and I'll actually go back to the beginning, because now you'll notice get blank form is no longer here on the homepage because I have set my account up to automatically connect to the server and download the forms for me. So I don't need to go to get blank form. And actually, as a matter of fact, they should have already been downloaded. Yep, they're already on my phone already. So it happens automatically as soon as you connect to your account, or at least it did for me. So now what do we want to look at? Now let's click the K at the top, and it's very likely that you have two accounts showing up, at least two accounts, maybe even more. If you've added an enumerator account and your personal account or your data project manager account. But here's where you'd be able to cycle through them, essentially, to choose which account you're working in. For me, I only have the one, but let's say, for example, you have your enumerator account, the one we're putting together now, and your admin account. They will have completely different configurations based on how you set each of them up. So they could go to different servers, they could go to different, obviously, usernames and passwords, they could have different access control limitations on them, different levels of automation. They're essentially existing as completely isolated from one another. But for me, I only have one, which is the enumerator account that we're going to set up now. So let's go back to the settings. And now let's talk about how we can start to limit access. If we look down at the bottom here, there's a section that says protected. So we have form management, user and device, and then we have protected underneath it. And here we have set admin password, project management, and access control. So let's first and foremost set an admin password. This is going to be completely separate from any of our other passwords. So it's not that you wrote in your password you use to log into your account. We're actually creating a new password here specifically for this version of ODK, or this login of ODK. And why we want to do this is essentially to start putting in restrictions or protections of how the app functions. And so in order to, once we create an admin password, in order to make any changes down the line, we would have to know the admin password, if that makes sense. So for me, I'm going to put in something simple, just so I remember it. Also, my admin password is not very crucial because I'm not using this for real life data collection right now. But I caution everybody to please set an admin password that you will remember. Maybe even write it down, honestly, if it's hopefully different from any of your other passwords. Because there's no way to reset this. There's no way to say, I forgot my password and get it back. You'd essentially have to uninstall the app and reinstall it. And so it's just good to make sure you have a note of this. And I'm keeping mine simple. You just want to make it something that nobody else will guess, essentially. None of your enumerators will guess. So I do that. I'm going to say OK. And now my admin password is set. And I can prove this to you if I go back to the home page. I click the K. I click settings. Now look at this. Now under protected, it says unlock protected settings. This was not the case before, obviously, because it had those three options: set admin password, project management, and access control. So let me click unlock just to show you, prove a point. I type in my very simple admin password that I created, and now those protected settings are there. So this is just a proof that you can start restricting parts of the app via the admin password. So let's start taking this a step further. Let's click access control. And here we are confronted with the three sections that we can start limiting access. Main menu, which we won't really look at quite yet. User settings, or form entry settings. Let's go to user settings. Now what you see here is a pretty big list. All of these items have a check next to them. They will mostly look familiar to you because we have actually seen a lot of these items throughout the settings that we're working in. When we go to, say, form management, we see a lot of these. Starting with what I think is very important to have on top, server. Let's uncheck that box. And everybody else can stay on this page. I'm just going to quickly show you what that does. So I've unchecked server. I'm going to go back to the home page to sort of reset those settings, come back in. And now I would have to enter my admin password again if I want to make any changes there. But if you notice on the top of my screen, server is no longer an option. I begin immediately with project display, and I don't have access to change the server. So let's think about this practically. This means I can't go in and change the server URL. I can't go in and even see, let alone change my username or password. So you can actually give this app to an enumerator, not tell them that they even have a username or password, because they're not going to get logged out and they're not going to be capable of logging back in. So they can just take this and run with it right away. It also means they don't need access to their enumerator account. They don't need to be able to have, to go in and start changing things in there essentially. And we've seen this happen. That's why we're giving you this walkthrough right now to try to keep that from happening again. So restricting settings can be pretty powerful for protecting sensitive areas of your app configuration, but also for simplifying, because a lot of these other settings, for example, a lot of don't need enumerators to go in and start changing. Some of those are sensitive because they could mess up the flow of data. Others are just sort of unnecessarily there because our enumerators aren't going to go into the map section and change anything, so we'll start taking those away. So if I want to get back in to change my settings, I have to enter my admin password once more. And now you see already, once I've entered my admin password, server is back on top and the protected settings are showing. So I'll go back into access control. I will rejoin you with user settings. And I'm actually going to just start unchecking all of these boxes for the most part. Project display, theme, none of these are particularly necessary. Language, we should set beforehand, and I can show you how to do that. I'm assuming I would be, actually, I'm going to keep language on there because let's go and check for that after. I'm assuming that you can change to Tagalog. I'm not sure what other language may be there, what other local languages may be there, but I would be incredibly surprised if Tagalog is not. Text font size, there's so many of these that are there but not particularly necessary. So I'm going to start unselecting many of these. Splash screen, yes, none of this is necessary. Blank form update mode. Okay, once you see blank form update mode, I'll bring that to the top actually. Think about blank form update mode, because this is where we started going into the form management settings. So a lot of these will now look familiar to you. And I would really like to take most of those form management settings away. Because with these available to the enumerator, they can start undoing the automation that we have put in place, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take off basically all of these. Auto send, delete after send. No enumerator really needs to go in and change this. So let's really start to put in those restrictions here. High-res video, like I've already said, we want to take that permission away. Image size as well. show guidance for questions. I think we can potentially let's take all of these out. Unless there's a setting here that you really think your enumerators need access to, we can always come back in and give it back. But for now, let's really restrict the app as much as possible and show you what that's going to look like once we do. So if I'm not mistaken, let me just double check. The only setting I have left here, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to remove language because we're already logged into the settings. So we can already change that for ourselves. So we have nothing from the user settings available. All of these boxes have been restricted. Now we can go back 2 pages and let's look at languages just to be. Actually, everybody can stay here for a moment. I wanted to show you what this looks like, what we've just done before we move on anywhere else. The home page looks the same. The main menu, we didn't change anything there. We haven't yet, but we can. If I go back into my settings, now look at what options I have available to me. Everything is hidden essentially behind the admin password. So your enumerators, when they get this app, when they scan the QR code, they will have a fully automated app that's logged in with forms on it ready to go without the ability to make any changes to the settings. So I'm going to enter my admin password. Perfect. Now all my settings are back as we had them because I'm logged in via the admin password. So let me go to user interface. And let's just see when we're talking about language. Am I in the wrong place? Oh, sorry, clicked maps unintentionally. No wonder it was very confusing. Okay, so when I go to user interface, let's choose language. And by default, well, at the beginning it says default. Let's see. I mean, you can look for anything that makes sense to you, but I will look for, let's see. Perfect, it is there. So we can do it. I will not because I won't be able to get out of it. But if you want to change the app to Tagalog, you can. But be mindful of one very important thing when you look at language in the user interface. This is only going to change the language of the app. And actually, you know, I say I'm not going to do it, but I may as well, just to prove a very quick point. This is not going to change the language of my actual forms. If I click, for example, you see, I have this selected now. Oh. And when I change the language, it brings me back to the main menu. And only you will be able to tell me if this makes any sense. Now I have to navigate myself back. And the funny thing that you find when you choose the language within the app is that certain sections are fully translated and others are not. But now just to quickly prove a point, you can see that all of my forms themselves are still in English because I didn't change the language of my forms. I changed the language that the app itself presented in. So now if I go back to the settings, you can see some of this is still in English. I really wonder who actually does this translation, because it seems like it's never fully complete. But here we go. Now I just need to navigate myself back. Sorry about that. Okay. So that was just sort of to prove a point. Now let's look at maybe restricting a little bit more. So I'm going back in with my admin password. Everything is here. Let's go one final time to access control. And let's maybe change main menu settings. So for example, if we want our enumerators to be restricted from any of these, we can remove them. I personally think let's maybe say delete saved forms, but otherwise we don't really need to restrict the main menu settings, but this is more to prove a point. And when I go back to the main menu, you see that delete saved forms is or sent forms is no longer there. Now we have this completed, right? We have our app fully restricted, basically. If I try to go to the settings, everything is locked. So now the next and final thing that we can do is share this QR code with our enumerators, knowing that they can simply scan it and be done. So in order to do that, we actually need to go to project management down here at the bottom. And here you can see at the very top, reconfigure via QR code. And it's going to have me scan, but if I instead, or sorry, it was going to have me pull up the camera right away, but instead I can say QR code at the top right. And now this is on display. Please nobody scan this, because then you'll just get my enumerator settings and you don't need that. But you can then share this with your enumerators. Once your enumerator account is fully configured, you can send this QR code either via, a screenshot. I can take a screenshot like that and send it on WhatsApp, or I can click the share button up here at the top right and send it via email or WhatsApp or SMS or whatever. And then they can either scan it themselves or import it. And it's that simple. And just to very quickly show you, let's say you're sitting next to your colleague and your colleague has the QR code up. If you want, you can simply click the K at the top right of the screen and say add project, and here it already asked me to scan. And it's that easy to add a new configuration. So on that note, I am completed with the enumerator account configuration on ODK. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, Min, it's over to you.
Thanks, Wes. I have been looking at the chat. I don't think there are any questions for us. And I can, of course, move on to the Kobo form section. But does anyone have any questions so far? Was everyone able to follow along? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up.
I think there's one question on the server address. It says Mamaura said that hers become kf.kobotoolbox.org instead of KC?
So this is interesting. If you KF is the address that you would navigate to on your web browser when you want to log in, but KC is what you would log into on your phone when you want to submit data. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, if your phone has reconfigured that, actually let me make sure that mine hasn't. I don't think it has. I was just looking at it. But typically that's where you would log in on your browser. So I don't think it's actually going to connect you to your account if you do that via the ODK app. But I haven't actually tried with that server address. But I would go with the kc.kobotoolbox.org.
Okay. Ma'am Maura, nasa Android phone po kayo or browser? Oh, she's using desktop. That's why po nagiging KF. Sa mobile po yung KC. Another question. What is the difference between Kobo Toolbox and ODK?
So Kobo Toolbox is the app or the platform we are all using. ODK is another open source data collection platform that Kobo Toolbox was actually built on top of. So they have a very linked connection. But when you're collecting data, the ODK Collect app is basically identical to the Kobo Collect app. You can find either of them in the App Store. But we have found that the ODK Collect app is updated more frequently than Kobo Collect, because anytime that ODK has an update to the code or with new features, the Kobo Collect app is a little bit behind that. It maybe is a month behind or something like that, but there's no real difference in functionality. We just find that it's best to stay with ODK because it's always, all the bug fixes, if there are any, happen first on ODK before they happen on the Kobo Collect, and any new features will show up on ODK Collect before Kobo Collect. But otherwise, they're very interchangeable.
Wes, thank you, Wes. Addressing another issue on chat, there is someone who accidentally scanned your QR code and now their settings locked. Could you navigate them out of the settings?
Yes, I can. I use a very simple password for this reason. If you scanned my QR code. Okay, let me share my screen again.
Yeah, this may be a good reminder, and things happen accidentally all the time, and this may happen for your projects as well. So if your enumerator is experiencing this issue, Wes will show you how to get out of the settings. And while Wes is setting up the screen share one more time, I'll address this question in the chat. Aside from Android, can we use other operating systems such as Apple, iOS? You can, however, not with the ODK Collect app or Kobo Collect app. This is because the apps are available only in Play stores, meaning for Android OS, so smartphones or tablet or any other mobile devices. There are equivalents found in the App Store, which is for Apple products, but they're developed by different people. So we are not sure whether data security can be guaranteed because it's not by the same developers. And B, and perhaps just as importantly, it's proprietary, meaning the functionalities are available, but you have to pay. And of course, we as a team advocate the use of free and open source tools, and this is not one of them. So we advise you to please use Android devices for field data collection if possible. If this is, if an Android device is not available, then you can use Apple for data collection and just use Safari or the web browser link version, or a desktop at the office or what have you. But for field data collection, we really recommend the ODK family for more safeguard measures, such as requesting GPS points and collecting accurate and on-site photos, etc. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. And Wes, back to you.
All right. So this is actually going to be a good lesson for everybody, but in particular for the person who scanned my code. What I need you to do is click the K, go to Settings, and from this page where you're totally locked out, my password was simply the space bar one time. So just click the space bar one time and then click OK. I did that for the very reason that I didn't want to use a complex password or use my own password in the event that something goes wrong. From here, if you want to get out of my account since you scanned the code, or if you are not scanned on my code but you just want to learn how to delete an account from your phone, you go to Project Management, and here you can either say Reset or Delete. So if you click Reset, you have all of these potential options to reset. But in your case, I would simply say Delete because you don't need my test account on your phone. So let's say Delete, yes, and now you're back here, which is actually exactly where I started when I first shared my screen. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Wes. I think that was all the questions from the chat that I could see. So if you've missed any part of the ODK section, please feel free to refer to the recordings. This session we'll share after today, but there are also previous sessions on ODK. Let's see. So if there aren't any other burning questions, we can move on to the COPO section. And if you do happen to run into questions, please type them in the chat or just unmute yourselves and open your mic. Let me share my screen. I'm just going to share the whole thing because it's easier. Let's see. Oops. Okay. So I have here an example, and this may look familiar for a lot of you. So we have the list name, and label. And we have some administrative divisions, which are moved over here. And then we have the next layer of administrative divisions link to the first layer. But then if you start going down, another third layer of administrative division, all the way down to some 600 different choices linked to administrative level 2. So you may have guessed this is a cascade for, in this case, for Bangladesh, but it's quite a large cascade. And let's say you built it out for the entire country of the Philippines. And you may have just as many or even more cascades. So let's assume that you built this on a separate sheet as we recommended. And let's try to type it in there. Cascade example. And then see what happens. I'm not going to repeat it again, but just to show you what happens. So I copy and paste the whole thing. Then it's quite simple, even though it's a lot of choices, everything seems to be there. And now I'm going to have a look at what the form will look like. And then, what do I get? An error message. Let's see. So if you read it a bit closely, the name for column, blah, 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 contains duplicates. Right. So often when you go deeper and deeper, or when you get more granular to further divisions, there can be, let's say, cities and counties named the same. So within, I'm taking our example, within Los Angeles County, there is a city of Los Angeles, and so on and so forth. This may be more common than you think. So what happens when you build the cascade and you get this duplicate error message? Well, I'll show you how, but I would like to direct you first to, yeah, depending on what you may run into, it may be, let's see, going to say, okay, going back to the home page or the form builder. And here, with the question mark, you have access to both the Kobo Help Center, which is the support page, and also the community forum. So if you remember the error code, let me go back to what it was. I can have a look at the error code, and depending on what the issue is, I'm just going to type in the keyword and see what happens. So in the support page, there's some threads related to question duplicates, but then maybe more helpful is going in the user community, because no matter what the error, other people have asked these questions before and answered them maybe several dozen times already. So that would be one of my first instincts when I run into an error. But in this case, let's fix this ourselves. So I'm going to save the form. And here is how we get into, this is a good introduction to XLS forms. I'm sure a lot of you are experts already working in. So I have the form. I have copied and pasted the cascade into the form builder. And in the form tab, with these three buttons here, I have the option to download the form in XLS and XML format. I can also clone this project to make a duplicate and create templates and manage translations, etc. But here, the XLS form is what interests us today. So I'm going to download it. And then when I open it, instead of the single sheet, I have the form. I have the whole form. So as we reviewed, as we may have reviewed in the past, we have the survey tab for questions and choices tab. And this is where the cascade resides, settings. So these are the types of questions, which is there are only 3 for admin level 1, 2, 3. And we have the choices tab with our cascade. And in the settings is where we would apply. So you're simply going to add a column header, allow choice underscore duplicates, and then have it under yes. So this is exactly what it looks like, all lowercase with underscore and no space or funny business afterwards. And then you just simply say yes. And this was our cascade example, the one we just tried to copy and paste. So in the XLS form, it's possible to make further customization. You already know that calculation can happen here, so it can cascade. And by putting in this simple column, now I'm going to save it. And this weird serial alphabets for the form title. I'm going to close it. Go back to our example where it gave us the duplicates error. And what I can do now, now that I've made the changes in the back end, I can click on this little arrow that says replace form. So what I can do is click on it, and then I can upload another XLS form to override the existing version. So here it is, the one where we just made the changes to add choice duplicates. And then I click on it. And if I try to preview again, there you go. It no longer gives me the error. And instead, my cascade works just fine. So for those of you who've already worked on XLS, this would be a welcome news because you can make a lot of customizations, a lot of changes. This way you can download the form and then make changes and upload the form to make updates. Let's see. So I'm going to share a useful website for your reference in the chat. Let me see. I'm going to open the chat. Here it is. So it gives you a brief overview of XLS forms and the functions that are possible. If you go to calculation, it gives you some tips. If you search for cascade, it gives you some tips. And there are more knowledge than I am aware of. So I refer to this quite often as well. And let me show you another example. Building on this is that, let's see. So we're going to quickly have a look at this form. It's quite a simple form. Let's have a look here. So this is a simple form asking 2 questions about your project and then geographical area, right? And here is the cascade again, admin level 1, 2, and 3, right? So it asks you about the type of activity. So in this case, let's say land registration. I am blanking out A or B survey. Just making things up. household income, satisfaction level, etc., etc. Okay. And let's say for this form, there are 4 activities that will be implemented for this purpose, for this monitoring purpose, I mean. And if you can ignore that the administrative divisions are not for Philippines, I'm going to select such and such sub-districts are being monitored. And then I can validate, and that would be the end of the form. So it's a very simple form. And you may notice that the cascade, instead of select one, I can select multiple. Let's see, how can that be? And also, I have my project's interventions. But if I wanted to make changes so that I can ask this, let's say you may have noticed there's an option to repeat these questions as many times as you'd like. And I can delete the responses for now. Okay. And repeat group function is possible through the settings of a group, as you already may be aware. But can I set a limit, or can I set a number of these repeat groups based on my own needs? Let's say you're only monitoring 3 sites, for example. Can I do that? So first, let me show you within this group, under the settings, so repeat group function is checked to yes. That's great. And I can set the number of groups depending on my answer. So let's download this form and then have a look at it from the backend. Okay, I'm opening this now. So we have the survey tab, choices tab with the cascade options and settings, and it already has choice duplicates enabled. You may notice that's why the cascade is working. So type, you may have deduced, are the type of questions. So we have text, integer for number questions, select multiple and select one, and note, etc., etc. So you have 2 groups. I'm going to highlight these just so it's more evident. If you remember, I have 2 groups to my questionnaire. One, something about my project, and 2, geographical area. So as it corresponds here, oops, these highlighted are the 2 groups. And you may remember repeat function is enabled for the first group, project's interventions. And instead of begin underscore group, it says begin underscore repeat. And that's how easy it is to change a group so that it can be repeated. Now, I can add a column somewhere here, and it doesn't matter. So we have different columns. Hint are the labels, required is mandatory. Appearance, you already know, choice filter, skip logic, calculation. And here, I'm going to add a column headed repeat underscore count. I'm going to zoom in so that you can see. All lowercase and underscore, no space in between. And I just added this column, and I'm going to highlight it to make it a bit more visible. And at the beginning of the group that will be allowed to repeat, I'm going to move over to the repeat count column and say 3. So you simply put in a number here. This one. And let's see what happens. Close the form. Oops. And then now that we made the changes, I'm going to replace the form. With the one where we just updated. Let's have a look at the preview. Okay. Now I have the group and type of activities, number of activities, type of activities, number of activities, and it repeated 1, 2, 3 times. And there's no more option to click the plus sign or the negative sign to delete a group. So you can set exactly the number of times where your group of questions can repeat. And that's pretty convenient if you already know the number of entities. And what is also neat is you can have the repeat count depending on the response to a previous question. So let's add a number question here and say, ask how many activities will you monitor for this round of survey? And let's say you want the enumerator visiting a round, and for this round, let's say they're only visiting a certain number. So you can add it in the form builder here. Also, you can add it in the XLS form directly. So add a row. We already know that integer is the number type question, and name is the data column name. So let's say number sites monitored. Okay, that's fine. And label is what people see in the front end and how the questions are worded. So let's have a look. I can save this. And it will be exactly the same. Let me show you just to show. I'm opening the other version, and you'll notice the difference because the column sizes are different and there's nothing hidden. So comparing this, so we have the integer question and the data column name is automatically changed to the wording of the question, which is frankly a little cumbersome. So mine says NO for number, sites monitored. I have an idea of what this input is about. Whereas if I want to see what this column's about, I have to expand, and even then that may not tell me. And here it is, essentially, the number question. So going to close this. Actually, because the names are similar, I'm not gonna save it under a different name. I don't want to get confused. And here we had it at 3. So we allowed the group to repeat 3 times. Whereas now I want to say, if the enumerator says we'll monitor 2 sites today, 2 activities today, and the group still remains 3 times, it's not so convenient for me. I want the answer to this question be linked to the number of groups here. And in that case, I can go back to the form, and under the repeat count column for the group that will repeat, begin repeat here, instead of a number, I can type in $, open curly bracket, and I can refer to the question, how many activities will you monitor today, by the name of the data column name. So I can simply copy and paste the data column name to be precise and not make any mistakes, and close the curly bracket sign. Let me zoom in and show you. So this means that the response value will be the repeat count allowed for this question. Okay, so I'm going to save the changes, close it, and then let's see what happens when I replace the form. I believe it was this form, I'm hoping. Okay, and if I have a look at it again, the question still stands, but you notice the project group questions are hidden. Because I haven't answered my previous question. So if I say 0, then it remains the same. They don't have to answer anything. If I say 1, oop. Oh no, something went wrong here. Let's troubleshoot what happened. So I'm going to open this form. Number sites monitored. Okay. Number of sites monitored, repeat count. Let's see. So there isn't an error here because I copied and pasted. How many sites remonitor, repeat count? Let's have a look. So if I say 3, I see. So it was just expanding and collapsing that I must have misclicked. So I said 3 now, and you'll notice 1, 2, 3. If I say 9, 90, that wouldn't be good. If I say 6 and hit enter, you'll see the number of groups increased to 6. And in turn, if I say 1 and hit enter, it comes back to only 1. So this is an example of how you can work inside the XLS forms and make changes and customizations, there are frankly many thousands of combinations of, great functions that you can use. So this is an example. And you can go to the settings tab and upload media. It's possible to add photos, instructions, or whether that's QR codes that you want to link to, or you can have external choices if your, for example, cascade or select options are too extensive. So if you had several thousands of different options, you may want to embed that not within the choices of the form itself, but in a separate file as CSV. And this page that I shared with you in the chat earlier will give you a much broader overview of these functions and details on how to utilize them. So you can already think about how you want to design your monitoring forms and get a bit more experimental with the functions. Let's see, let's check if I covered everything. Yeah, so I think that's pretty good for the basics of XLS forms. Let me stop sharing my screen, see if there are any questions. Okay. I'm not seeing anything in particular, but
There's one
would
question.
anybody like to? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Negros Oriental is asking if they gather data using their cell phone, how can they connect through the PC or laptop to access the data from their phones?
If they gather data
Did I
from,
get your question correct po? MIS Dar Negros Oriental, or would you like to explain it po to clarify your question? Yeah, it says here, if they gather data using their cell phone, how can they connect through the PC or laptop the data from the same account from their phone?
yeah, thank you, Melba. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question right. So if they collect data using, their mobile phone, you can log into the Kobo platform to look at data, of course. I'm not sure where the issue would be, unless Wes, did you get the question? Maybe I'm.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, it took a second to unmute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think maybe let's make the distinction that there is the data collection app, ODK, or Kobo Collect, the one that we've worked in. But that is strictly for data collection. If you want to review the data, if you want to look at it on the map or in the table or however, then you have to go to, let's just say kobotoolbox.org, log into your account, and you can do this on your phone if you just open the browser, or you can of course do it on your computer. Log into your account and you should see the data there. It's always collected in under the form that you were using. So when you log into your account, you click on the form name that you want to see the data from, and it should all be there. And you can do that on your phone or on your computer. I think maybe there could be an issue when you set up ODK Collect that you did not have the automated setting to send form when finalized. And every time you reach the end of a form in Kobo Toolbox, or sorry, in ODK, you need to mark as finalized, and you're prompted to do that. And once you do it, once you mark your form as finalized, meaning you've completed it, it will automatically be sent given the settings we put into place. So I hope that answers the question, because sometimes people see that they have the form still on their ODK Collect app, meaning they've completed the form and it's still available there, but usually it's been transferred to the server as well, and you should be able to see it. The only time it's on your app but not on the server is when you don't have connection to send it, or if you have not set up the automated process that it gets sent automatically.
Thanks for that answer, Wes. I hope that answered the question. If it's not addressed, please let us know. And that concludes my section, unless there are functions and details that people would like us to address. I'm noticing we're quite early on time, so we do have a bit of extra time until part 2 of the Power BI section begins. So we can either break now for a longer lunch and when people can do other work. I'm sure everyone's busy. Or we can use this time to address, you know, any Q&A, further discussions.
Yes, so clarification from the earlier question, they were asking how they can access the data in their phones before they submit the completed form to the server. So for instance, I guess after data collection from the field in the form, using the phone, they go back to the office and to review their responses. Instead of reviewing it in the phone, they want to connect it to the laptop so they can review it from the bigger screen, if that is possible. So before they send the data to the server, they are asking if they can review the data in their phones and in the laptop. Does that make sense?
Hey, Melba, that makes perfect sense as a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. So I know that the first thing we would have to do is undo some the auto send on ODK, because of course when we put in that automation, we send it right away from the phone, and if we want to skip that step or hold that step rather, then we need to undo the auto send section of the ODK app. The next part, I think this is a question that we may have to wait for Rindra. So it's good that the question came up, especially when Rindra is joining us. I think we can start the next session where Rindra is leading Power BI. We can actually have him respond to this question if he knows the answer. I believe that the files are stored as an XML file on ODK. I'm not sure how you would visualize that in an easy to read kind of way, because I think it's more of a coded kind of a way. But Rindra may have a better answer than I do. So we can wait until Rindra is with us and then we can ask him.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, so any other questions po from our participants from your experience sa Kobo or ODK? Okay. Can we create forms using and Kobo form builder entirely without using XLS? And do you have a sample of data collected from Kobo? Just want to visualize how the data will be presented. Thank you.
So Min, maybe while I take the first part of that question, you can start pulling up some examples of data that we have collected, both visualized in the platform and maybe exported to Excel. I think, well, yeah, Min, if you can do that. And regarding the first half of the question, you can do most of your programming, most of your coding, most of your creating of a questionnaire entirely in the form builder. But there are certain features that you absolutely have to go to XLS to add on to that. So it could be the case that you make 99% of your form in the form builder, but then literally for one tiny thing, like what Min showed with the repeat count, you have to export it out and go into XLS and just add that one, that one line. And that's it can be a little bit of a burden to do that, but because it's so minor, the amount of effort you put in at the very last minute, usually you can have the form basically perfect and then just add your final bit of logic at the very, very end. Because as we've seen, all of the skip logic and calculation and even setting a normal repeat group, not necessarily setting how many times it repeats, most of what you can do in the form builder is all you need. But it's more that you need to go into XLS when there's a very particular function that you want to add. But yeah, mostly you can do this in the form builder.
Thanks for taking that question. Now I was looking for examples. Let me see. So to add to Wes's response, let me share my screen and give you an example. So it's entirely possible to build forms just on in the Kobo, but yeah, like Wes said, your functionalities may be limited. Here is an example of our portfolio mapping effort in Kenya. The data is not so, the volume is not so impressive, but it's the only form in English. Let's see. So under the data tab, if you go to the map, you see data points that are spread out across Kenya. And you can disaggregate the data depending on the questions you included in your survey. So these will differ based on what questions you ask in your survey. So I can disaggregate by, let's say, for example, sector, redress mechanism at a project level. So I have 20 complaints from this site, and these follow-up questions will give me an idea of what they are and where they are at. So let me exit out of this map. You can look at the reports and sort of customize them, use different colors or chart types. At the table tab, you can download it in whatever forms you desire, make backups of it periodically just to make sure that you have the legacy versions, etc., etc. And by downloading these data, whether as XLS or you want it as a, just the GPS coordinates, you can extract them and do what you would like to with it. So part 2 of this today's session, Rindra will show you how to link your data or how to link Kobo onto a Power BI to visualize the platform. And Yeah, using different softwares, whether if you have a GIS specialist, you can produce maps with the data and run further analyses depending on your needs. We have portals and dashboards, but unfortunately, I don't have access to the accounts at the moment. So live demos sort of difficult. Oh, if I can show you a couple of examples, one from the Philippines. This is from the colleagues at the Department of Agriculture for the Philippines Rural Development Project. They're using it as a operational maintenance and audit system. And you have, they've built a dashboard, and here's a map. Clicking on each point gives you a brief overview. And if I'm not mistaken, ever since the training, they have been plugging in data collected from Kobo into the portal for monitoring, which can be automated and is relatively straightforward process if you have technical staff on the team. And we're of course happy to support further if this is something you'd like to do. Anyway, I hope that answered your question. And moving on to the next one.
Yes, thank you for sharing that PRDP example. That's very familiar to our participants, and I'm sure they would like to have something similar also. And actually, the other question in the chat is for Ma'am Christy. Some participants are requesting for face-to-face training because some of them couldn't follow due to slow internet connection, and also on some of the more advanced functions.
Melba, Ma'am Christie, and everyone, I'd just like to say we would love to come to Philippines and meet you face to face and do this in person. But
That's great.
unfortunately, it's not a possibility at the moment. But yes, as soon as restrictions lift, we can explore, how we can go back to the old times. I'm sure Wes feels the same way.
Okay. Ma'am Christy, are you around? She's attending another event actually. Otherwise, we can break for lunch.
Yes, I think everyone would appreciate it since they've been connected for longer. So is it noon in Manila, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep.
Okay, so Rindra will join us for part 2 at 1 p.m. So we have exactly 1 hour till we meet again. So yeah, let me pause the recording here. Okay. So just a reminder, part 2 of the session will focus on the use of Power BI. Some very brief and basic intro and how to connect your COBOL data for your data visualization needs. But before we get started, I think we left some questions hanging from the first section. Wes, now that Rindra is connected, could you reiterate the question maybe to remind everyone, and maybe we can let Rindra answer?